Welcome to the IGEOS show, where we help grow the passion for an extraordinary workplace. If you're listening to or watching this, we hope to strengthen your passion for a workplace that has the potential not only to have an extraordinary impact on your life, but also on the world. My name is Amit Riker, and my co-hosts are Valerio Pascotto and Timothy Galway. Now to you, Valerio.
Thank you, Amit. What drives our efforts is really a vision and credo to enrich humaneness in the workplace. For that, we interview thought leaders who have been inspired by values of compassion, empathy, and modeling to share their discoveries, challenges, and successes. Really, there is no time like now to change the tide, from hateful divisiveness to seeking similarities, from the myth of the genius to the wisdom of humankind, and from the fears of the primitive brain to the wonder of generosity and warmth.
To support you in this work of creating extraordinary workplaces, we would like to offer you a free worksheet you can download on the 5 disciplines of a high-performance team. Just go to IGEOS.net to download the sheet and learn more about us. And now, on to our guest for today. And welcome, conscious leaders and teams. We have an exciting guest with us today, Kevin Rutherford, who is the CEO of Nuun Hydration. And I'm going to give a little introduction about him, and then we're going to have a fantastic conversation today about culture, teams, and leadership. So Kevin is the president and CEO of Nuun Hydration. He was formerly the CEO of Mrs. Meyers. I love this little description of his from his Twitter handle. He's striving to be a beacon of light for humanity, animals, and our planet. And he also identifies himself as an earthling veg athlete, and he calls himself the chief Eternal Optimist at Nuun Hydration. Just a little bit more about him. When he joined Nuun, he came after a very impressive career leading brands to accelerated growth, both as a CEO and a marketing leader. He was the president and CEO of Caldrea Company, which is best known for Mrs. Meyer's Clean Day brand, where he successfully grew the business to be one of the leading natural lifestyle companies in the categories where they compete. Prior to Mrs. Meyer's Clean Day, Rutherford experienced tremendous success as a marketing director for Kashi Company. So I could go on and on and on, but Kevin, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm stoked to be here. It's great to be here, Amit. Thanks for inviting me.
One of the things I really appreciated, so we met at the Conscious Company Leaders Forum, and so you were on the panel, The Future of the Workplace. So I want to get to that in a moment, but just in your own words, I'd love to hear a little bit of your journey of how are you here? Why are you here?
Yeah, thanks. By the way, I always think it's a privilege to be able to tell my story. In fact, I wish, if I had a wish for everyone in this world, they would have a chance to have their personal story heard, and also just kind of hear what people have to say about them. I always think about a book that was a big hit, roughly a decade ago now, maybe a bit more, is Tuesdays with Morrie, small little book if you haven't read it.
Oh, yes,
right?
I love that book.
Right, and if you think about that book, is the takeaway that I heard is many times we don't get a chance to hear what people have to say or to share our story. And I just feel really grateful that I've had that opportunity, leading Mrs. Meyers before this one, and then now leading Nuun Hydration. And it's just, I just wish everyone had that privilege. But let me come back full circle on that one, because I get to tell my story yet again, and how I ended up here. So I always like to start like all Canadians do, to let you know that I'm Canadian. Kind of like vegans like to tell you're a vegan, which I am, and then CrossFitters like to tell you they're CrossFitters, but I'm not. Not strong enough for that. So all kidding aside, though, I did start my career in Canada. I grew up there, and I worked in retail as a buyer after finishing school at the University of Ottawa, and I was at Loblaws, and my career journey kind of took a different turn. I had this passion to go after marketing, and I left to work for a company called SC Johnson, a family company. And that was an amazing part of my career and really foundation setting in terms of building skill set. And so I was with SC Johnson in Canada, and I moved to the US in 2001 with SC Johnson and kind of progressed through marketing roles. And then I had another inflection point, and the inflection point was, what's my passion? Where do I want to be? What do I want to do? And what's interesting is I thought I really wanted to be all about sports marketing. And I went to Miller Brewing Company in Wisconsin and left SC Johnson and got a chance to really get access and exposure to sports marketing. And it was amazing in many ways. However, I also had an inflection point there going, you know what I think I love more? I love more about fitness, wellness, and more be a participant versus the spectator side of sports, which I love to watch sports. But to work on that day to day, I got more energy about the fitness and wellness side and being that. And so the inflection point then, I veered over to Kashi Company, as you described earlier. And then I'll just kind of bring it to a close here for you. And the thing about Kashi that's affected me as hopefully a business leader, and I put that in parentheses, hopefully people see that, is Kashi was life-changing for me. And it actually helped me look at business very differently. And the difference is this. It was the first time in my career where it was about a purpose that was at the forefront, that was very clear to us, something bigger than the products we sell, and the beliefs we're feeding into that. And once I learned that and the power of that, I just never looked at business the same way. And truly, I think that's how you and I ended up getting connected, because if I didn't have that inflection point, I wouldn't have then ended up becoming the CEO of Mrs. Meyers and really trying to help the team transform our thinking around we're a cleaning company to we're a wellness company. And what's the difference we can make for the planet and people's health with the products that we sell? And then Nuun, it was like, electrolyte tablet for performance. I'm like, no, Nuun is bigger than that. We're on a mission to help people, inspire people to move more. And the team really embraced that. So this bigger purpose, really, like that's the catalyst for conscious capitalism, if you will, really, in my mind, touched me at Kashi. And then here I am today, and hopefully applying that over and over again, if you will, Control C, Control V, and I mean that in a positive sense.
So I'm curious, when you were at Kashi, was there something about the culture or a particular leader or being part of the team really exploring, was there sort of a consciousness there that something cracked open for you? Did it happen instantly, gradually? I'm curious to hear how that evolved or gave you that inflection point.
It's a little bit of both. I will tell you, the moment that I had a chance to understand a little bit about the way they presented themselves of talking about Kashi, and I say they because I wasn't part of the team at that point. Just even that opening of saying, hey, here's our vision and our mission. And it was so different than anything else that I experienced. It was actually something that I felt like I connected to. So there wasn't instantaneous. However, the evolution over time and living it, because I also believe there's rarely, if ever, a shortcut in life, whether that's in business or sports. You kind of need to live it, earn it, and grow with it. And I grew with Kashi. The team and the culture is really what the change agent was. So you had the mission, but you are who you surround yourself with. And everyone at Kashi really embraced this mission of, I think if I recall, this is a while ago, so this shows how powerful the mission is. I think I might actually get it word for word. We dream of a world where everyone embraces natural health. Like, the fact I can recite that is crazy, right? Meaning, how many people can recite a mission from 7, 8, 10 years ago? And so I think it's fascinating to me that we all lived it. And so this work-life integration really seemed to happen at Kashi. It was what you believed was the right thing to do for yourself and your personal life. You actually did at work. and living that day to day, and learning from so many people around that. And by the way, kind of keeping you on the guardrails, so you kind of stay focused on your own personal why that matched up with the company was really powerful.
Wonderful. How has that now influenced your role as CEO at Nuun, or coming up until this point as well?
I think what it's done for me, both at Mrs. Meyers, but even most recently for Nuun, and it'll be 5 years this fall, and it feels like it was yesterday, and also feels like I've been here for a lifetime, because I'm just so connected with the people personally. What it did was, so I think one of the things that I genuinely have always had in my DNA is I have this desire to lead by example with those around me, my friends, family, etc. But it's also to inspire and push and motivate them to achieve more than what they thought they could. And the cumulative effect of that is just incredibly powerful, right? And so knowing that that's maybe a little bit of how I think, the energy of being around people and then infusing it with this common mission that we established at Mrs. Meyers, where we said there must be a better way, was kind of the short-handed version of it. And that's then transformed, if you will, into the Nuun world, where we're inspiring everyone to move more. But when we approach innovation as an example, we look at it and we say, if we had to start all over again, how would we do it? And so this idea of this mission and how we're always pushing forward and constantly trying to grow, I think that really, I think, starts from a person as an individual and how I've evolved, but then how do you really integrate that in the business that Kashi has infused itself? So let me give you an example. This could be interesting for you and the audience. Is use Nuun. And when I came into Nuun, it was a brand that had this cool factor. It was really interesting. What I also found when I dug in is there wasn't, we talk about that beacon of light, that north compass, right? And it didn't necessarily have that. It was much more about get more electrolyte tablets, get performance, and we're good. Mm-hmm. And what I really did here was work with the team and pull what was important to them. And then, with a smaller group, you start to build this momentum of crafting what is it that what's the difference we're trying to make in the world. And I think that was what was powerful, because then what ended up happening was we said, well, really we're much bigger than just a small group of elite athletes trying to perform their best in a triathlon or adventure race. What we want to get Amit to do his first 5K, or we want you to commute to work by bike more, because we believe that movement is the number one thing you can do for health and vitality. So if that's what we're obsessed with, how do we do that? And so that idea of bigger picture of why we do what we do, and what I learned at Kashi, it just kind of transformed all the way through. And what's fascinating is, if there's anyone that's just really hard on, it's all about the business and the numbers. Well, what I can tell you is this approach to business works. Like, it will drive superior results. And the data would support what I just said, including, by the way, working through a really tough recessionary period. Today the economy is going really strong. So it works in either or, because people really want to connect to why you do what you do. The other thing I would say this is, you'll hear me talk about team a lot. I'm a big believer in servant leadership. And the way I describe servant leadership, maybe the best way to think of it as this is, your goal is to help others succeed. So what can you do to help them? And if that permeates throughout the whole organization, you're basically constantly lifting each other up. And what I would expect out of our teammates, that I hope they expect of me, is I would never ask anyone on the team to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. Now, for clarity, we all have roles, so it wouldn't make sense for me to do everything, or anybody else on the team. However, I wouldn't expect someone to take out the trash or clean the dishes if I wasn't willing to do it in our kitchen over here. If we're sharing, which we do, our Airbnb homes that we rent as a team, and maybe we have a few too many people in that house, then we're probably should, and air mattresses come out, I'm absolutely willing, and do frequently, as the team would tell you, sleeping on an air mattress. I wouldn't expect anyone else to do it. By the way, they would do the same thing right back for me. So small little tactics, if you will, but it really kind of comes back to what's the mission, and then we're all in this together, team first. How do we go?
That's fantastic. One of the other co-hosts, Valerio, he's written and talked much about servant leadership as well. And so one of the things we definitely incorporate with the folks we work with is, how are we cultivating this team mindset, and that there's this really integrated aspect of anyone's willing to be able to sort of roll their sleeves up if it's going to help the team overall. And it's great to hear a little bit of that. Can you tell us a little bit more about, is that something that you came into, or either how did you help elevate that, or help continue to build that strong culture of a very solid teamwork in a servant leadership perspective?
I would say when I came in, there was incredible talent on the team, very passionate about what we call #Nuun Life, meaning living the brand. You are the brand is you, that type of idea. That existed. However, it was it's funny, I say this, divided as a team, a little bit like our country feels like right now, which is really unfortunate. And that's kind of interesting. It was what ended up happening is it almost felt like when someone would put something forward, there was as I called it, I said, it's a race to know, right? And almost becoming a roadblock. It almost felt like there was a bit of pride of saying, no, I can't do that. And I'm going, this is crazy. Like, guys, like, this is team first. We got to pull forward. And so the mentality that I really wanted to shift, that I wanted to shift, that the team, fortunately for me and all of us, quite honestly, they embraced it, is this road to yes. And so basically what I wanted to do was change a mindset of, it wasn't really team first. It wasn't anti-team. It just wasn't team first. And there was tension points between the different functions, which is normal in teams. If you think of stages of a life cycle of team, of forming, storming, norming, right? Performing. And we were in a storming phase that wasn't getting out of there. And so what we had to do is step backwards a bit, and let's talk forming, and let's talk about norms. And what I tried to explain to the team was, the road to yes doesn't mean we're going to say yes to everything, because we can't do everything. We have to make choices. However, let's dream a little bit in a situation versus being the obstacle right away. When, Amit, if you give me a suggestion on the team, I'm going to embrace that and say, well, let's talk this through. How would we do it? Now, what we may determine, this is where the team really embraced it. I go, we may determine the opportunity of cost to do that doesn't make sense, but at least embrace it. And I don't know if you remember this, when I was on the panel there, I talked about it, and oddly enough, Michael on the panel was part of the study, and I had no idea. And so, which is good, because I was supporting a study, thank goodness. But it was psychological safety. I didn't know that's what it was called before I learned about this in the last 6 months. And the psychological safety is, if you're going to give a suggestion, if you're always going to feel like it's a no, you actually don't feel safe to give that. And I think by pushing the team on the road to yes, that gave the team to feel more safe to come up with suggestions, as opposed to safety is about saying no. And that flip was really big. How we got to, I think, one team united is all about, do we agree that this is the mission that we're going after? Do you agree that this is the difference and the positive change we want to make in the world? And I didn't come up with it, just to be clear. I led the charge to come up with it with the team, and I was pulling from what their existing beliefs are, and then how do we help that manifest itself? And I think that was the game changer right there. So the little small nuance, we had to go back to forming so we could storm a little bit, and then, well, today I'd argue the team is probably much more on the high performing side. We have our ebbs and flows, but it's definitely more closer to the fourth stage.
Fantastic. Speaking of from the panel, one of the things I wrote down that you had mentioned, you said, culture is not a checklist, live it. What does that mean?
So true. I was, let me give you a little story. I was talking to someone connected a recent grad. Actually, he's not even a recent grad. Sorry, he's a grad from such an impressive school. He graduated from Harvard. And I say that to not impress you or anyone, but more to impress upon you. This is this really highly intelligent person that I'm like, holy cow, you're really qualified and you want to get my advice. And so he really was picking my brain as to the success of Nuun and trying to understand what was going on there. So he at Harvard, and he's gone into 3 companies. He's progressed in the kind of blue chip, more consumer packaged goods, but it's blue chip world. It's a very successful company. He's done really well. And he's at this inflection point where he wants to shift to more of what he calls it a lifestyle company like Nuun. And so when I described Nuun to him, he made this comment that I thought he summarized it really well. That's why I gave the Harvard comment, because he's clearly smarter than me. And he said, he goes, it sounds like the team is the brand and the brand is the team. And I said, yes, that's it. And here's where I was going on that one. So we were, as one of the measurements to see whether or not we were progressing on a thriving culture, I really wanted our team to make the list of outside companies' best places to work. I did bring that up on the panel, by the way. And truthfully, that was actually the only one we applied for. We didn't apply for the other one that was mentioned on the panel. Because what we cared about was outside was reflective of much more of the industry and where we play. And we said, boy, if we can be considered a best place to work with this group of companies that are like-minded with us, we must be really doing something right. And we made it. And we made it last year. And
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. And we made it not because there was a checklist, like you said, or like I said that you were repeating back on that one. It wasn't that we had, fancy perks and ping pong tables and things like that, if you will. Although we do happen to have a ping pong table and we have few cool perks. But we're still a scrappy little company at the end of the day. And it really comes down to, walking the talk, being consistent, being focused, high empathy, and really engaging and making everyone feel valued and part of something bigger. And I know I keep mentioning that feeling part of something bigger. The reason I bring that up is that's ultimately the connection point that brings us all together. And so when we talk to each other and how we communicate with each other, that's really the power, that servant leadership of hierarchy goes away when it comes to conversation and debate. Decisions will happen by default as their chief eternal optimist, the CEO. I can make the decision. I know that. They know that. So I don't need to tell them that. Let's just have the debate like at an equal level, and let's kind of banter this back and forth so we can get to a spot and go, well, this decision has to be made. Boom, I'll go. But there's a lot of respect for that because the voices feel heard. I feel valued. To be clear, I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but I don't think it's about consensus on everything. That's going to take forever to make decisions. What I am saying is it's about making sure people feel valued day to day. They can't be involved in everything, but and genuinely, let's seek out opinions. I just before this call with you, I was in a meeting with a new employee. So I meet with every single employee as they come in. And so her name's Ailish. So Ailish, if you're listening to this, you'll hear this, but she brought up something. So brand new employee, she's maybe with the company 3 weeks. Ailish, if it's longer than that, I'm sorry. But it can't be much longer. And we were on a Zoom chat much like this. And Ailish gave me an insight that I was going, oh my gosh, that's great, right? And she said, one of the values that I feel like I'm seeing at Nuun already and that she tries to personify is go after it. And I'm like, I love how you just framed it after that. Go after it. I go, we've never said that before. That's it. That's like kind of drive for action and how do we move forward. But I think where my long story short is, what I wasn't expecting, because I genuinely was taking in, I said, I'm going to share this one right away. One sec, let me just type this so I don't forget. And then she goes, oh, thank you. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, no, you gave the value. But this idea of everyone should feel valued, because the ideas can come from anywhere. And not all ideas will be executed. Not all ideas are good, including my own. But I think that's what it is. And I think the checklist is a mistake. And I think we can look at some core competencies that we need to have, and we can make sure that we can use those as guidelines. But it really isn't a checklist, because it's constantly evolving. It's alive. Culture is alive. I heard an Australian consultant once say that culture, which I love this one, and I'm paraphrasing, so it's a bit of my own words in here, but culture is this living ecosystem in which strategy lives within it. Versus culture lives within the strategy. Strategy lives within it, because that's what keeps everything going. And the analogy that he used was around kombucha. And he's like, so if you think of kombucha, right? So as it's kind of the yeast, and it's festering, if you will, and it's in a good way. It's growing, and it's basically getting to this place where you can obviously then consume it, and that takes time. However, if you get one fruit fly in a batch of like 10,000 liters or something like that, you could literally kill the entire batch. So it's important that you don't let any one individual become a toxin within the group, and then be, if you will, a cancer, a disease that will then permeate and mutate over time. And so you really need to address that really quickly.
Oh. You are an avid athlete, so my understanding you're a triathlete, Ironman triathlete. Is that correct?
That is true.
And so, just your own upbringing, very active. Tell us a little bit about that, and how that plays into how you show up to work, how you are you.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think training for Ironman and triathlons creates a discipline on time management in order to train and be ready for race day. It's a commitment, both on a plan, like what's the plan and how am I going to be ready, to day, how do I commit to that time? What's that look like? But it's also being really clear about your priorities and knowing you can't do everything. And I think that comes through for me day to day. I tend to be a little bit too optimistic at times, and I might try to shove more in than what I can do. But for the most part, and I preach this to the team, saying be really clear on your priorities in life, because that will make it easier on you mentally, so you're more at ease and you're not feeling stressed out of when you need to make decisions and something has to give. You're very clear on that. So, like for me, it's my family is my highest priority. My second one, I would say, is Nuun, life, is work. My third is training, and I have many priorities underneath that I want to see friends and stuff. But if I have to let some of that go at times, I'll hold off, because I've got to make sure I'm doing these three really well. And then that, if you come to terms with that, I think you become more approachable, because I think I'm just comfortable in my own self. And therefore I think I can be in that moment with people as well. And I'm a big believer in that one. As I hold up my cell phone for you, one of the things that we do in all meetings is you need to put it down face down. And you need to be in this moment right now. So I think that's how it shows up. I will share with an observation with the Nuun team. This is how crazy our group is, which I love. When I first started at Nuun, I was just doing fitness stuff. I stopped doing triathlons because I was the priority was Nuun, and I had to fully inundate myself and really understand, and that had to be my focus. And I didn't want training to be a distraction. So this is my observation. The team may disagree. No one's ever told me this. I found when I decided I was going to train for some half Ironman distances 3 years ago, there was a different respect that the team gave me. It was a whole different level. I didn't do it because of that, but I observed this. And then when I did the race and then came back, even if I was disappointed with the result, that didn't matter to them. It was like, there was this sense of pride in that, and pride in that their CEO, if you will, said he was going to do this and went out and did it. And it was almost like I was kind of hearing this, how cool is that? And I just thought, I'm just doing like all of you guys, but that was kind of it. It's like, no, you committed to a goal that you're going after. And we think that's really cool. And I thought that was really interesting. That wasn't why I did it, but that was an observation. And then sure enough, I'm doing it again this year and I got this vibe again. And I've heard it a couple of times. And I guess if we lead by example on our mission, that's how it's manifesting itself in my work life.
That's beautiful. How could, as conscious leaders, even as conscious team members, take an aspect of that and apply it to themselves? What would you say to them?
Walk the talk, lead by example, be part of the team on a collective group to connect to that mission and do something together. I'll give you an example that isn't fitness related. We actually did this at Nuun, but I'll go back to Mrs. Meyers and just use a different example for you. Mrs. Meyers, where we all agreed is we can make a difference and make the planet cleaner. And how can we do that? And so how we've created strategies around that from a business perspective, and how is that going to come to life through new products and innovation or renovation, improving and reducing our footprint. But I also think what's interesting is connection with the team and a deeper level. So I say walk the talk. Walk the talk also means walk it with them. And what we did was we adopted a section in Minneapolis, that's where I was at the time, the Greenway. And the Greenway was, I think there's somewhere close to 70 miles of bike paths throughout the Twin Cities, to allow people to have safer bike experiences, also to commute in and out of work. And we adopted this section of the Greenway to clean it. And so the message that was being sent as we all rode bikes together, and by the way, not everyone rode bikes prior to that. So let's get on our bike. Let's go human power versus engine power. And then we're going to go clean up the Greenway together. And again, when I told you about servant leadership, I'm there picking up the garbage right there with you and leading the charge. I'll go in front, right? Follow me. Let's go. Be the Pied Piper, if you will. And I mean that as in a positive sense. It's like, come on, let's go. I'll take the hill first. And I found it fascinating because people really loved it so much. I would hear frequently, when do we do the next one? When do we do the next one? It also manifested itself back into new products ideas. Even if they weren't great ideas, I would get consistently from the team of, hey, Kevin, have you seen this new plastic? It's much more environmentally friendly. Would we ever consider doing that? Hey, Kevin, have you ever seen this? And the point was people were thinking about it, and it was walking the talk. And then that started to resemble with the rest of the team. They started to think about it as well. And by the way, their behavior reinforced my behavior. Like I wanted to do it more. Mm-hmm. So I'm not suggesting I'm holier than thou by any stretch. And by the folks around you and doing it together, so walk the talk, but then you are who you surround yourself with, that reinforces you to stay on the path of what you think, what you believe is the right thing to do.
Wonderful. As a conscious leader, as being part of a conscious team, what's one of the biggest challenges that you face?
Let me give you two. I'll go internal and I don't want to say external, but outside the Nuun employee, if you will, so stakeholder. I think the challenge as a conscious company, sometimes what can happen is when you're being very purposeful, which also means you have a high degree of empathy. The culture can then start to be perceived as soft and not driven. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Like, I don't think it has to be that way. I don't think if by being high empathy means we're not driven, and it doesn't mean we hold each other accountable and hold ourselves accountable. And it's really important to have that accountability and standing up and being part of the team and knowing that you're part of the solution, and we need to hold each other accountable to that. And I think that's a really big challenge for a conscious company, because sometimes we feel like, I think as leaders, we're not sure how to get people to get on the right track. It's almost like it feels mean and not purposeful. However, we can't succeed unless we all stand up tall. I love the analogy, by the way, that we heard at the summit or the Leaders Forum. The very end, I don't know if you remember this one. It was, we were standing among, or sitting, but around all the tall standing redwoods. And I thought that was really amazing, because if you think about it, all the redwoods stand tall, sometimes 200 feet in height, right? And they're strong. However, they're strong individually, but they're even stronger collectively, because the roots itself went no deeper than 6 feet. I just love that. And so it was the interconnectedness underneath that said together we'll be even stronger. But each tree I still think is really important. Each one was really strong as well. So we need all of them to stand so that we can be here. So I actually replayed that back to the team at our town hall meeting. Let me give you the second one. The purpose-driven business and the conscious business leaders can also be perceived as soft to outside stakeholders. And I say soft because I'm giving the perception of what that looks like. And I don't know if soft is the right word. Maybe lack of drive. And I think one of the challenges that we have as a collective group is to understand perception, and how do we communicate to our stakeholders and internally that purpose doesn't mean lack of drive. And by the way, that also doesn't mean it won't, as I mentioned earlier in our chat today, is it doesn't mean lack of results. On the contrary, there's a lot of data that suggests that purpose-driven businesses perform much stronger over a sustainable period of time. How do you talk that language, right? And how do you communicate with your stakeholders? So I'm not suggesting, one of the things I'm not suggesting is don't change who you are. However, you need to adjust how you communicate depending on your stakeholder to bring them along for the journey. And I think that is a challenge that I'm very aware of, that I'm constantly thinking of, but it's sometimes pretty tough. And how that would manifest itself is I actually don't talk about culture a lot with our board. And I don't not talk about it, but it's lower on the list of when I communicate with them. But when I talk internally with the team, I start with culture. So maybe that's a mistake, just to be clear. That may not be the good advice, but I can tell you that that's the challenge, because what I want to do is get them on the same page. Now let me talk to you about culture and how that drove all those things we just talked about with outside stakeholders. When I talk with the team, it's like, what have you done lately to be a servant leader? How did you drive this thing? Tell me a story about what's going on. What's that look like? Awesome. By the way, look how that resulted in these great business results. So it's like, I'm not changing who I am. I'm not losing my authentic self. And I hope the team doesn't lose that either. They won't, hopefully. But I do think it's important we really try to understand who you're communicating to in life and adjust so you can speak the same language to help them understand where you're coming from. And I think that's the two challenges I would say.
Wonderful. It's a ongoing, evolving, learning path for all of us. And to that effect, circling back sort of the origins of sort of how we met, you were on the panel about the future of the workplace.
Yeah.
And so what's your vision? What do you see as the future of the workplace, either for Nuun or more expansively as a society and as a world that's really building, I hope, and I imagine I'm preaching to the choir here, that is really cultivating conscious companies, conscious business that's really making an impact for the world, not just drawing upon the world. So what does that look like? What's that vision?
I would say one of the things that we heard at the Leaders Forum that really hit home for me is business is I think it was termed up something like this, is business is the largest enterprise on the planet, bigger than any religion, any government. It has a significant impact. And so significant, maybe the biggest impact. So therefore, one, we need to embrace that, whether someone is anti-business or not. You need to understand what the world is right now, and then how do you move forward. And so where I'm going is the terminology that came up that I thought was really brilliant is business leaders, but businesses specifically need to be the moral compass of where we want to go. And I thought that was absolutely a brilliant summary. And the moral compass is absolutely what we need in more businesses and all businesses to go after. And it's if we do that as a greater business community around the globe, I do believe that humanity, all earthlings, can thrive. However, if we don't have business leaders and conscious leaders, and therefore conscious businesses step up to do that, I think it could reset itself and get to a good spot. But I don't know what kind of damage will be done in between that and the end point. And that's scary. So we need us to be proactive to be out in front of that. So as the future of the workplace, that's why I truly believe that the place where more and more potential employees, as well as existing for retention, are going to look for businesses that they connect with. And I will tell you, the other thing that's going to happen from a physicality perspective is the idea that we're talking right now on a video conference is basically a lot of where the future is going. Some flexibility needs to happen there because we are so connected. So the technology is really allowing us to be more flexible. So I think businesses really need to embrace that and figure out, how do you still stay connected, even though you may not be in the same building. And again, I think what will drive that is this purpose and one common angle to go. And I think if you don't have that, I think you're always going to be wondering what's Amit really doing right now, as opposed, because he's not in the office. Meanwhile, you may not be doing very productive stuff in the office. So I think how it manifests itself it's gonna continuously evolve, and I think we need to be prepared for that. And how do we embrace it? Again, technology. There was a quote that I think I shared with you guys that I heard once, and I also thought this one was brilliant. As fast as the world is moving today, it will never be this slow again. And just like think about that, right? As fast as it's moving today, it will never be this slow again. So if you don't have a very succinct and clear purpose that everyone connects to, how much more dangerous, if you will, to your business is it if you don't have clarity on a purpose with the technology basically moving things faster than ever has been, and yet it will never be this slow again. I'm telling you, you might want to have one common foundation. And I think that's the purpose, or that's the future of the workplace.
Fantastic. Kevin Rutherford, thank you so much for joining us. What final words would you like us to leave with the audience here?
Didn't think of that question. I would say this is, don't look left or right for someone else to do it. Step forward and be that leader, right? I think it's Gandhi, right? I think it was him, and I apologize if it's not, but be the change you want to see in the world. And I think the same thing goes with just even the respective group around you. And you are who you surround yourself with. Also recognize you are one of those people that they're surrounding themselves with. So lead the way. That would be my one comment. And have fun.
Oh yeah, that.
have fun. Laugh. Make fun of yourself. Don't take yourself too seriously.
Wonderful. Kevin Rutherford, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. I realized I had my prop with me, but I didn't get to show it. So got the little Nuun Hydration tablets. Kevin, where can folks find out more about you, about the company, or whatever you might want to share with them?
Sure. Hey, if you want to find out more about Nuun and the team and the company and our products, if you go to Nuun, N-U-U-N, so as in midday, but spelled with U's instead of O's, so Nuun.com or nuunlife.com, it'll take you to the same spot. And you'll learn more about us there. Nuun Hydration is the social media handles that you'll see out there. And if you want to look for me personally, you can find me at clean_lantern. And I can tell you that story another time of how that came about. But, so it's all fun. The team was basically making fun of me, and I embraced it back at Mrs. Meyer. So Clean Lantern is me, but Nuun Hydration, more importantly, and even most importantly, let's get out there and move a little more.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Conscious leaders, conscious teams, thank you very much for joining us today with this conversation with Kevin. Kevin, it's been such a pleasure. We'll be talking soon.
Love it. Can't wait. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thank you for joining us today. We have many more exciting thought leaders to come on this show. If you enjoyed this interview, please click the like button and also subscribe so that you can stay tuned to learn from other powerful thought leaders in future shows. We would also appreciate your comments and feedback on the show, as well as who else you would like to hear from. And don't forget to visit our site, IGEOS.net, to download the free worksheet on the 5 disciplines of a high-performance team. See you next time.